go back to that Putin interview now, because joining us live from Warsaw is Polish journalist Michal Rachon. Thank you very much, Michal, for joining us on the show. Now, must say, I did tune in to quite a large amount of the interview. It was very, very long indeed. It did appear as though Putin massively had the upper hand, like he was leading and managing the interview rather than Tucker Carlson himself. A very long monologue about Russian history going back to the 600s.
Well, the thing and the reason for which Vladimir Putin, or Vladimir Putler, as we call it, this person here, always comes back to the history is because the old tradition of KGB is to make history a tool to use it as a political leverage. We've seen that and we've heard that back in 2009, exactly the same blatant lies about the history of Russia. And actually, he uses the history as a kind of justification, or actually twisted version of history as a justification of current activities of this ex-KGB colonel who is now ruling Russia. We've heard that back in 2009, during the 70th anniversary of the Second World War in Poland, where he basically claimed that Poland is a state responsible for the Second World War, not Germany, not Russia, as if the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact never existed. So the reason why he does it now is that he uses it as a political tool to project the political future, the geopolitical future, which is basically known as a common geopolitical space between Lisbon and Vladivostok. This is the way it was always sold in the reset era after the infamous reset button push and infamous policies of, sorry to say that, my government of my state back then in between 2007 and 2014. So nothing new. Putin uses history or twisted version of history to justify the crimes that we are witnessing in Ukraine right now, but in many other places, in Chechnya, in Georgia, you name it.
Yes, it's absolutely fascinating to see which particular bits of history Putin decides to include in his narrative and which bits he leaves out. The Soviet-Nazi pact, as you mentioned, Molotov-Ribbentrop, seemingly forgotten by Putin in his history of where Nazis may or may not have been. But I want to ask you about the crucial part, perhaps. The crucial part of this interview where Putin says he's only after Ukraine. He doesn't want to go for Poland or Latvia or Lithuania or Moldova or any of these countries. It's only Ukraine. Although I suppose, Michal, that's what he said initially. He said he didn't want to invade Ukraine, and then he did.
Well, there is no war in Ukraine, according to Mr. Putler. So the thing is, if he says that he's not interested in anything more except Ukraine, and still he thinks that collapse of the Soviet Union was the biggest geopolitical nightmare of the 20th century, and his goal is to re-establish it in a way. So what does it mean in practice? I mean, it means that he is interested in all the sovereign states that are now outside the Russian Federation, which means that Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Ukraine, Belarus actually is digested already, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, half of Germany, and other states, Finland in a way, are on his wish list. I mean, he's a Chekist, he's a communist, he's a KGB colonel. He is lying every time he moves his lips.
Well, thank you very much indeed for talking to us, Michal Rachon. Great to speak to you. You are a Polish journalist coming live from Warsaw. The problem is, though, the problem is that there is a growing number of people in the United States and in this country in the West who are concerned about the amount of money, because there are so many domestic issues, concerned about the amount of money that is going to this war. And yet you can't escape that.
You look at the amount of money that the United States spend on its military. It's about a third of its federal budget. They have never spent better money than on Ukraine. The amount of money they poured into Afghanistan, into Iraq, so much more than they've given to Ukraine. It is the best investment they could possibly make. They are decimating the Russian military for pennies compared to what they threw into the Middle East, for pennies compared to what they spent, to what Ronald Reagan spent on his Star Wars program. He spent 8 years trying to bankrupt the Soviet Union, didn't quite manage it. Look, the United States today is managing it for a fraction of the cost that Reagan spent.
Well, I hope that it comes to a conclusion sooner rather than
But it is
later.
really, really interesting and important to listen to the perspective of the countries like Poland that are right there on the border of Ukraine, that feel the fear of what a Russian juggernaut might do if it's successful.